So in today's video, we're going to take a look at what's going to happen if NATO goes to war with Russia. And this is going to be mostly a 1v1 between Russia and NATO. The cause of this event is unknown, but Russia goes to war with NATO. Yeah, let's get right into the video. But before starting the video, I have made a Discord server which you can join. The link to the server will be in the description. So yeah, you guys can join. But yeah, Russia is now at war with NATO. And for right now, Russia is probably conscripting everyone into the military. I mean, they have around 160 million people living within their borders. I don't know how accurate that figure is, but still they will be able to conscript around 60 million troops. This includes teenagers and all those people. But yeah, enough yapping, let's get right into the video. Also, it's gonna take the US some time to send their army to the front lines. So until then, Russia will be rock and rolling. At the start of the war, we can see that Russia calls in their ally Belarus as well as Serbia. And we can see that the Russians are now pushing into Estonia as well as Latvia. The Russians were successfully able to take the capital city of Estonia, and this leads Estonia out of this war. And down in the south, we can see that the Belarusians are also pushing into Lithuania in hopes of getting to the capital city. But Serbia, you're not in the best position. We can see that the NATO troops are now pushing into Serbia, and now they are at the gates of Belgrade. The NATO troops come in from all sides, and with the fall of Belgrade, we can see that the remaining parts of Serbia just surrender. Well, that was kind of easy. But over here in the Baltics, we can see that another Russian military arrives, and this army reaches Kaliningrad, and it also takes out Latvia and Lithuania. Over here in Finland, we can see that the Russians are now pushing in from all sides, and they're trying their best to get to Helsinki, and the Russians are also pushing in from the north. The Russians are now also pushing into Norway, and by far this is all the progress that Russia has made. The Russians are now preparing for a war against Poland, and now we can see that the Russians as well as the Belarusians are pushing into Poland, but Poland is also good at defending itself, but still the Russians are making some significant gains in Poland. Up here in Finland, we can see that Helsinki was taken, and slowly but surely Finland falls into the Russian hands. This is a moment in history. But yeah, Finland goes ahead and surrenders, and now the invasion of Sweden begins. The Russians are now following the coastline, and they're aiming to take Stockholm too. But yeah, down in the south, we can see that the Russian troops are now aiming to take Warsaw, and after a decisive military campaign and a lot of losses on both sides, we can see that Warsaw was taken, and slowly but surely we can see that Poland also falls into the Russian hands. This was a huge blow to the Western countries, or maybe the NATO countries, and for right now Russia is pretty much unstoppable. We can see another event happening in Turkey, where the Russians make a successful naval landing, and they're making some significant gains in Turkey, and they're also pushing towards Ankara. We can see another naval landing on the coast of Romania, and the Russians also push down into Bulgaria. And up in the north, we can see that Stockholm was finally taken. By the way, Sweden just joined NATO, so congratulations, Sweden. But yeah, Stockholm was taken, and the Swedish troops have lost their morale, and eventually with the surrender of their major cities, we can see that Sweden finally goes ahead and surrenders. Down here in Turkey, we can see that the Russian troops are following the coastline, and they're planning to surround Ankara, and they're making some significant gains against the Turks, but they're failing to encircle the city. The troops in Romania finally push in and capture Bucharest, and with the fall of their capital city, we can see that the Romanians have also lost their morale, but they still do not surrender. And we can see that the Russians are now also pushing towards Sofia, and they're trying their best to get to Sofia. Over here on the Polish border, we can see that the Russians are now pushing into Slovakia, and pretty much half of Slovakia just falls. But it is now that we can see a fully mobilized NATO army arriving on the front lines. Also, the US army just arrived on the front lines. So yeah, we can see that the NATO forces are now pushing back the Russians, and they're also pushed out of Slovakia. And we can see that Warsaw was re-liberated, and pretty much all of Poland was re-liberated. Over here in Sweden, we can see that the NATO army has arrived, and they're pushing back the Russians in a very good manner. Eventually, Stockholm was retaken, and we can see that the NATO forces push in, and they encircle a lot of Russian troops over here, who after getting encircled go ahead and surrender. And now pretty much all of the Russians are pushed all the way back, and now things are not looking good for Russia. We can see NATO forces arriving in Romania too, and eventually they retake Bucharest. These troops in Bulgaria also surrender after getting encircled, and all of the Russian troops are now pushed all the way back, and they're going back to Russia. Down here in Turkey, we can see that the Russians are still getting pushed back, but still they managed to survive over here. But overall, things are not looking good for Russia. Over here in the Baltics, we can see that Kaliningrad was taken, and another major US army arrives on the front line, and we can see that the NATO army is now pushing into Belarus, and eventually they took Minsk, and Belarus goes ahead and surrenders. Up in the north, we can see that the Russians were pushed back out of Norway, and now the retaking of Finland just begins. NATO forces follow the coastline, and Helsinki Helsinki was retaken, but the Russians do survive in Finland for now. Now, because Belarus fell, we can see that the NATO forces are now pushing into Russia, and now they're trying to get up to St. Petersburg to disconnect the Baltics from the Russians, and we can see that the NATO forces are pushing towards St. Petersburg, and they're threatening the city. Eventually, all of Finland was retaken, and after a push was made, we can see that this part of Russia was disconnected, leading the surrender of this place, which held the nuclear weapons. And after a decisive military campaign, we can see that St. Petersburg was taken, and these Russian troops were also encircled. This leads their surrender. Also, these troops from Turkey are pushed back, and now the NATO forces are trying to get to Moscow, and there's this kind of front line. We can see that the Russians are unable to push back the NATO forces. They also make a landing in the southern part, and these troops also push up, and after a very bloody battle, we can see that Moscow was taken, and with the fall of Moscow, we can see that the Russians finally go ahead and surrender. Alright, so if we take a look at this peace negotiation, we can see that Finland took all of these parts of Russia, and we also have the Baltic states expanding. We have Poland taking Kaliningrad, and they also took these parts of Belarus. Serbia was split between all of these countries, and this part is only Belgrade. The Turks were also able to take this part of Russia, and because the US contributed a lot in this war, we can see that the US took all of these parts of Russia. So yeah, this is gonna be it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you guys want to see in the future. And thank you for watching.